This is the Blockchain Show, episode number 189 with Adam Jackson, the CEO of Braintrust, the world's first user-controlled network that connects organizations to highly skilled tech talent. Company shares have been tokenized and distributed as a cryptocurrency amongst the freelance talent that uses the network, so it's truly user-controlled. Now, if you haven't already checked out episode number 188, it's worth checking out. It's with Utopia Genesis Foundation. So if you're into music like I am and the blockchain, it's a perfect fit. That was a good one. Another great one was Envision, talking about waste tracking on the blockchain. So you can find that and some other earlier episodes on theblockchainshow.com or wherever you get this podcast. And I hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving this week. Here's the show.
The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello and welcome back. You're listening to The Blockchain Show. I'm your host, Ethan Kinderconnect, and I'm here with the CEO of Braintrust, Adam Jackson. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Ethan, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got involved with the world of blockchain, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a software engineer by training. I studied computer science at Vanderbilt, moved out to San Francisco right out of school, and that was back in 2003. And I'm sort of a software engineer turned entrepreneur. Braintrust is my fourth venture-backed business. All of them have been marketplaces and all in different categories. So my first one was a local shopping e-commerce search engine that allowed people to search online for local products. That was acquired by Intuit. I worked there as a product manager for about a year. And then I left to start my second company called DriverSide, which was a marketplace that connected car owners with mechanics that had capacity for them. We grew that into a national marketplace and were acquired by Advance Auto Parts, the big box retailer on the East Coast. Then in 2012, I started my third company called Doctor on Demand, which is a large video telemedicine platform that connects doctors and patients for real-time video visits, medical and behavioral health. I served as CEO there for the first 4 years. We grew it into, a pretty big enterprise healthcare company, at which point it was time to put in what I'd like to call a real manager to kind of keep the thing growing. And so that's what we did. In 2016, I stepped out of day-to-day, still very close to the company, and it's growing like a weed now, especially in COVID times. But when I stepped out of day-to-day there, I really wanted to go back to my true passion, which is anything deep tech. So I got really back into machine learning and also really picked up on blockchain. I had owned Bitcoin for a while. I bought it, I think, in 2011. A friend of mine who runs offshore casinos was using it as a payment method and was really excited about it back then. So that was enough to get me interested. And then I was able to participate in a couple crowd sales, like the Ethereum crowd sale, Binance, a couple others, and really kind of use those opportunities as a forcing function, both, as an engineer, how do these tokens work and how might they, reorganize how firms operate, how companies operate. And then as an investor, how might a token capture value? And then as a developer, smart contract, right? Code is law. This could be cool. So that's what got me in full time. And along the way, I helped start an asset management company called Cambrian, which exclusively operates in the digital asset space. I have two partners there, Martin and Jay, who run the thing full time now. We actually spun Braintrust out of Cambrian. It was part of this thesis around user-owned economies and tokens, being the ownership and control method instead of shares of stock. So that's kind of what brought us here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an impressive background. It's kind of exciting to see where all this is heading, and especially in the business world, it kind of gets traction and becomes real. Just to begin, give us maybe like an overview of Braintrust and how all that works.
Yeah, for sure. So with Braintrust, we're building something toward the thesis of what we call a user-owned economy. And the core belief there is that user-owned networks will grow faster and become more valuable than investor-owned networks, right? So the big idea here is, having my partner Gabe and I have been building and investing in two-sided marketplaces for 15 years. And the problem you see with those is it's very hard to build liquidity, right? It's hard to break out and actually get buyers and sellers en masse. And so what you end up doing is you raise a lot of money, a lot of venture money to subsidize one or both sides of the marketplace. And if you're lucky enough to, hit the growth, get the flywheel spinning, and get into the S curve of the growth, what ends up happening is investors end up owning the majority of the network, and they need returns, right? And rightfully so. They took all the risk, and so that need for returns ends up coming from maximizing fees on the users, right, through transaction fees. And so what happens is the incentives begin to diverge between the owner-operators of the network, the investors, and the people who make their living on the network, the users. And so, we're seeing this play out today in the gig economy, right, where the highly extractionary networks, and it has really driven down the economics for, chiefly the supply side of the networks. And so we figured, look, there's got to be a better way. And so the Braintrust model inverts all of that. We raise a minimal amount of capital. We actually got profitable on our first seed round of $6 million. You have very, very few employees. And you push all of the functions out to your users. So engineering, design, marketing, community, all that stuff goes out to users. And in return, you give them ownership and control of the network. And so, our network, so this is a model that would work on any two-sided marketplace. But we decided to start in this sort of narrow but very deep category of connecting technical talent, so think developers, designers, product managers, with big, ongoing, sophisticated jobs, chiefly for Fortune 1000 companies. So I'm not talking about like logos and websites. We're talking about like large SaaS applications, big mobile development projects, data warehouses, machine learning, et cetera. And we serve clients like Nestle and Porsche and Blue Cross and TaskRabbit and NASA, Coursera, on and on. And these are companies that are basically find it hard to hire these technical talent. And now, especially with COVID, right, they can't even get into their offices. So we solve this, pretty large pain point of getting, sophisticated experienced tech people in-house. But we do it through contract basis. And so that's where the marketplace plays right now. And I can get into later, like how the token works and all that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've used some other services throughout the years that have been not nearly as advanced, but things like Fiverr come to mind. And I was happy to see TaskRabbit is on your list of trusted companies. Other than the crypto, which we'll get into here shortly, what are maybe some of the problems of these other, I don't know what you'd call them, talent networks? Like ZipRecruiter comes to mind. Indeed, there's all these programs out there that I would talk to people using them, and at the end of the day, they're like, "Yeah, I would rather just use Craigslist because these don't really work for me." So,
well, the biggest problem is cost. So, ZipRecruiter and Indeed, those are mostly full-time job boards. And so, to be clear, Braintrust plays in the contract work, so we're not placing people full-time. But what's interesting is a lot of our clients are actually converting their full-time roles into contract roles because they just can't find the people full-time. And a lot of these were in office kind of, butts in seats kind of roles, and they can't even get into their offices, right? So COVID sort of accelerated this remote work trend that was already happening. It sort of accelerated it 10 years. And so now all of a sudden, where Braintrust might have been hey, we should try that out, hopefully it can work, but we still would rather have everyone full time in our office. Now the opposite is true, right? So it's just kind of lucky timing there. But yeah, so you think about these other talent marketplaces, the ones you mentioned included, but also like Upwork or 99 Designs or Fiverr, right? They take relatively large fees from the talent, anywhere from 25 to 50%. And that's, not great for talent. And, it's not scalable for the client jobs. And so Braintrust has a flat 0% fee we take nothing from the talent, and we take a flat 10% fee from the client. And that's basically just, there to sustain the network. And so because those fees are so low, and because we're owned and controlled by our users, we don't have an incentive to charge ourselves big fees, right? Our incentive is actually to keep the fees as low as possible. And so because those fees are low, we can enable, like, we're not trying to compete with Upwork or Fiverr, right? They can do all the logos and websites they want. Those aren't very interesting jobs for our talent. Because our fees are so low, our talent can then serve much larger projects, right? So we're building a SaaS system to track packages to and from the International Space Station from NASA, for NASA. We built an insurance shopping comparison engine for Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're building cars, so like dashboard car software for Porsche. I mean, these are like giant, super interesting and ongoing projects that, just couldn't touch a high fee marketplace in the past.
Wow. Yeah, that is definitely something else. This has potential to really revolutionize not only the workforce, but, maybe just technology in general, and how it just seems to me right off the bat a lot more efficient to get the right people working on different projects more efficiently and a little bit more fairly. I like the 10% flat fee that the companies pay, kind of like a cost of doing business. I'd imagine that's a lot lower than traditional means of trying to find people. And my last point is it's kind of interesting to see things on the flip side. Obviously, trying to look for a job, you think, man, this is difficult. Especially with COVID, for some people, I don't know where to find work. I don't know who's hiring, but it seems like companies are having the same problem, and which is hilarious for some people, maybe, that there's just a lack of an intermediary. And I know that it might be a little ironic to use a decentralized application to bring together people as a mediary sort of force, but this is really a unique way to go about it. So I can really appreciate what you guys are doing there.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it is a bit ironic. I like that term, because what we're basically doing here is we're replacing the expensive middleman. So that's the tech recruiter, Indeed.com, you name it, job board that takes a big percentage, or an agency, right? A development agency where you go pay them a giant amount of money and they take 50% of it and the talent gets the other 50%. We're replacing those intermediaries with open source software, right? Like with a blockchain enabled system that anyone can participate in. It's curated by the community itself to ensure quality. And because it's software, software is eating the world, blockchain's eating the middleman, right? That's kind of how we think about it. So it is an intermediary, but it's one that all of the talent who make their living on the marketplace can own and control. And that's kind of where the token comes in, is voting on the rules and that sort of thing in the community.
Yeah, that is fabulous. I think me personally, I don't really have a technical background in the sense of most people would think. I went to school for audio engineering. I look for jobs kind of on the side as like a podcast editor. I help people produce shows when I have the time. Is Braintrust really meant for more people who are like in IT or software development, or do you foresee this branching out into maybe some other industries?
Yeah, great question. I mean, today we connect software developers, designers, product managers with all these big non-tech companies that really need them. That's just where we started, right? And the reason we started there is, look, if you're going to use a token as a governance and incentive mechanism, you got to be able to explain what the hell a token is and how to use it. And so that's a little easier to do with technical people, rather than like if we started in ride sharing or e-commerce or gaming or whatever. And so we're starting here, but you could see a very logical expansion into any other knowledge worker industry, right? I mean, we're kind of learning now that all knowledge worker jobs can basically be done by remotely, as well, if not better, than in an office. And so you could see this model, this user-owned marketplace model, you could see it coming into legal, compliance, accounting, tax, right? All of these jobs where like you really just don't need to be in person. So I think, we call this kind of the great unbundling of corporate America. We actually think that we're seeing this already in the software industry, but we think all knowledge worker industries, people will eventually unwind out of their full-time W-2. They're going to become their own independent contractor. They're going to rely on marketplaces like Braintrust to find gigs, and they're going to specialize, right? They're going to just like, instead of like the 20 or 30% of your job that you enjoy as a corporate employee today, you're going to pick the one thing you really like doing and then do it for 4 or 5 companies. And you're going to do it from wherever in the world you want. And you're going to do it when you want to, at the rate you feel you deserve, as long as it's competitive in the marketplace. And, it's better for you, the talent, and it's better for companies, right? Because it's more flexible for companies. And so I think the current model where corporations just warehouse tens of thousands of people and basically underutilize them and make them commute to offices, and it's just a lose-lose. I think this Braintrust model is going to help fix that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It actually reminds me of something I heard Jordan Peterson talking about in a lecture, but more on the technical side of things. So I think that really great minds are moving towards this direction, and I love the fact that people can focus on what they want to do and do that pretty much full time, but have the control of deciding which companies they want to work for and working from home. This whole COVID situation has really kind of shown us how to realign or reevaluate what's necessary, and think about all the people driving to offices and all the time wasted, all the fuel wasted. I don't know if we're ever going to go back to normal here, but maybe we'll extract some improvements for the way we go about business. And obviously, this is a different world from what I'm used to, but I can appreciate the utility here that you're providing. Now, I wanted to, I did want to get into a little bit about the smart contracts, or how that works with tokenizing and payment.
For sure. So I love to describe how our token works by first saying what it is not used for. Because there's this common misconception that, if there's a token involved, that must be the payment layer, right? And that's sort of how all the projects for the last couple of years started out. And it turns out the payment layers we have now are fine. They're not ideal, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of USDC and Tether and DAI and these sort of tokenized dollars, and that makes a ton of sense. It's much easier. But asking companies to pay talent in some like crazy cryptocurrency whose value fluctuates all the time, it's just not reasonable, And the other thing is, like, it's still kind of hard to use this stuff. And so Braintrust does 2 things. One, we all transactions are done in fiat. So the companies pay in dollars, usually via wire transfer, and then we pay our talent in fiat, dollars or euros or whatever. So all the jobs are denominated and paid for in dollars. Where the token comes in is it's an incentive mechanism and a governance system. So I'll start with how you get the token. There's dozens of ways to get the token, but basically doing anything you do to help help us build Braintrust, you're going to get rewarded in tokens. So that can be small things like writing a nice post on LinkedIn or Twitter, or talking about why you believe in our philosophy, on social media. You may get a couple tokens for that. Or more importantly, what's the real value of any two-sided marketplace? It's the users, it's the people. And so we reward people for referring talent and clients. So if you refer some small dentist office, in Florida to do a website, you get 1% of whatever that client does. But if you refer Microsoft, you'll get 1% of what they do. And this is all done through the smart contract, right? It's non-discretionary. You have an invite code that's generated by our software, and then everyone who signs up with that code is gonna pay you. It's basically MLM style economics, powering a referral engine, paid for with our token. And so the people who end up, collecting large amounts of our token are the people who invite really valuable clients and really valuable talent. And that's sort of how you build a decentralized sales team and a decentralized recruiting team is by rewarding people with ownership and control of the network. And then you might ask, okay, well, why would I want this token to begin with? The answer there is twofold. One is control. You can vote your token. We're actually forking Compound's governance framework. Compound is that popular DeFi protocol. And actually, Robert, the CEO there, is an investor and advisor to Braintrust. We're actually going to use all the great governance systems they've already built and tested. We're going to use it for Braintrust. And, one might ask, well, who cares about control, right? Nobody votes their Facebook shares, right? And even if they did, it wouldn't matter because only one person's vote matters at that company. We're the opposite. It turns out when you make your living on a marketplace, you actually care quite a lot about what the rules are, right? I mean, I give you an example, DoorDash last year, the food delivery app, they came up with a new feature where you could tip your Dasher. But then last year, DoorDash Inc. just decides to keep all the tips and book them as revenue, basically stole the money from the Dashers. And so, look, if DoorDash had been built the way we're building Braintrust, that would have been impossible. To change the rules and say, hey, we're going to steal your tips instead of giving them to you, they would have had to go to vote, right? The smart contracts wouldn't have allowed it. And of course, the users would not have voted in that way. So voting and control matters a lot to our talent because they make a living on our platform and they want to have a say in how the platform's run. The second use for our token is something. Now, there's a bunch of you can redeem it for classes to upskill. There's a bunch of little things you can do with it, but the second thing we're building is something we call staking along with your bid. And what this does is, let's say there's a competitive bidding situation where there's, say, 25 bidders on a say it's a job to build an iOS app. And, let's say you're really confident in your ability to do this app at the certain price. So you may stake some tokens along with your bid. And what that does is it puts those tokens, if you win the contract, it'll put those tokens into escrow, smart contract. And if you were to, no show the job or do a really bad job, you may lose those tokens. So it's a way of kind of putting your money where your mouth is and differentiating your bid in a competitive environment. And so it turns out that's really valuable to talent to be able to differentiate themselves in competitive environments. And the only way you could do that is with tokens. You can't do that with cash. Otherwise, then just people with lots of money would win every job. And so the only way to get our token is to help us build a network where we'll never sell tokens to the public. And so that creates this kind of interesting token ecosystem where the more tokens you have on Braintrust, the more successful your business will be and the more control you'll have over the network. And the only way to get those tokens is to help us build the network, refer more engineers, refer more designers, help vet those people, refer clients, do things that normally we'd raise $100 million and from venture and hire 1,000 employees to do. We're doing the opposite, right? Raise as little as possible and have your community do all the work.
Very useful. I can see, well, first of all, with the governance, I think that's the correct term here. Say there were to be some sort of change, like you had mentioned the DoorDash, the infamous tip scandal. If there's a change that were to go on, how are the network stakeholders going to be aware of something to vote on? Is it so transparent that they're going to get a notification, or is there emails sent out? I'm just curious how the voting mechanism works there.
Yeah, great question. And to be clear, we're still building this. This part's not live yet, but any token holder can submit a proposal, and then we'll have. I think in Compound they do it in a couple of days. I don't think that's long enough. I think you need a few weeks for the community to review and weigh in on the proposal, and then you vote. One token, one vote. And we're actually going to partner with some exchanges to make that actually really easy to do, so you don't have to deal with MetaMask and things like that. We want this to be highly usable blockchain, and Ethereum's not super easy to use yet, so we're going to build a lot of stuff to make that easier. But yeah, you'll get a notification, and there'll be ample time to weigh and vote, and then if it passes, the code becomes law.
Interesting. Yeah, I really like that. And then just to clarify, gaining the tokens, you meant that, helping build the network, referring clients. Is there any other ways to earn the tokens? I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, there's dozens of ways. The making referrals to talent and clients are the biggest ones because you can earn variable rate bonuses. You can earn like a percentage of the transactions that people you refer end up making, right? So that's the big one. But also, like, let's say, so we have a peer-to-peer talent vetting system where our community vets new talent and decides if they're allowed to transact on the network. Because we have a highly curated talent group, it's important for us to protect the quality of our talent. That way, we get the best enterprises and the best jobs coming out of the network. And so if you participate in that peer-to-peer vetting system, you'll be rewarded tokens for that. If you promote us on social media and talk about, hey, I just got paid for this job and here's why I love Braintrust, you get tokens for that, things like that.
Right on. I'm curious what you think the future of work might look like, not only for people in the gig economy, but maybe just for humanity. If I know that's a huge question, you can take it any way you'd like.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think corporate America is going to unbundle. I think knowledge workers doesn't have to be like this elite tech talent, this type of people we deal with Braintrust. Anyone who does a knowledge worker job, a paralegal, an accountant, they'll eventually unbundle out of the firm and become specialists, and that will earn them more money and give them more flexibility and ownership and control over the marketplace that ends up feeding them gigs, right? So I think we're gonna unwind the corporation, and that's going to erode massive corporate profits, right? And that's probably a bad thing for long-term corporate shareholders and a very, very good thing for talent, right? For the people who actually do the work. And I think that's going to permeate. I think it'll start. We're starting in knowledge workers. I think others will do this in the gig economy. So I call the gig economy sort of last mile. So people who deliver food or groceries or deliveries, and then people who drive other people, right? Uber, Lyft. I think that entire gig economy is going to go from, highly extractionary, the invasive business model we see today, delivered by Uber and Postmates and DoorDash, to completely user-owned networks, where when there's a protocol, will automatically decide what prices are based on supply and demand. It'll be a perfect market executed by software instead of by human beings in San Francisco extracting a lot of value, right? So there'll still be surge pricing, except all of the surge pricing will go to the supply instead of being extracted by the middleman, right? And then if we see the network will be built in such a way that if we see, okay, prices are really high to drive someone from Marin to SFO, well, then it'll put out a note and tell other people, hey, the rates are really high right now. You may want to chime in and become a driver in this part of the county. And okay, now the protocols just balance supply and demand. Today that's it's clunky and very extractionary, right? So I see all of the places where middlemen are extracting a lot out of our economy, mostly big U.S. corporations. I think those are going to migrate to blockchain-based protocols that give the value that's today extracted by the middleman, give it back to the users.
Actually, I used to drive for a lot of these companies that we've been talking about. And something that struck me was you really have to drive a lot to make enough money to sustain yourself. And, each platform is different, but it's a lot of work. And these people are not really taken care of, they're independent contractors. So this whole, I think the proposition, it seems like such a good thing when you read the handouts that are mailed to me, like, oh, we want to keep millions of jobs for Californians. We don't want them to lose their healthcare and all this stuff. And I was like, really, healthcare? It's like I would see the healthcare offers that they would provide to us through different third parties, and I was like, this is kind of a ripoff. Like, this is pretty much all of the money I'm earning is just going to go to health. It's like you're not really providing much of anything other than connecting you with like a market insurance provider. It makes me want, and then I look at the bottom of the mailers, and it's all like provided by Uber, DoorDash, Postmates. There's like a coalition of these like rideshare apps that are trying to keep the status quo going for them. And it makes me wonder, I don't know, is this such a good thing that like, should we be voting in favor to keep things the way that they are? I don't know the full specifics of it, but it's just interesting to me, who's funding it and just the kind of the spin that they're trying to put on it. I don't know if you have anything to comment on that, or it's just kind of, it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, the status quo is not going to work for sure. And the rideshare companies, their basic argument is, look, healthcare is a societal issue. It should not be completely tacked to the employers. And I agree with that, right? That doesn't mean I don't think those gig economy businesses shouldn't be dismantled. I mean, I think they should be completely unraveled and they should be replaced with a user-owned model like we're doing with Braintrust. Like I don't, they're just not providing enough value for the fees they extract is the bottom line there. A totally separate issue is healthcare, right? The American medical system is a criminal empire in every sense of the word, right? The insurance companies, the hospitals, they're all ripping everyone off. And we, the collective, insured, are stuck with the bill, whether that's through, very high premiums or which are soaked up mostly by ourselves and the companies we work for. And if you're an independent contractor, it's even worse. But that whole system needs to get fixed. And that's a harder part. It's probably beyond the scope of this discussion, Zeb.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel like maybe they just throw that in there just to make things more complicated. Kind of like how politicians will just start talking about abortion all of a sudden when they don't want to talk about other issues.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a really good point there. Just kind of highlights what we've been talking about is, I like how you said, unraveling a lot of these current ways that companies are going about things. For a lot of people, it's just easier to work for a company that gives you a W-2 or some sort of tax. They take care of all the taxes. In other words, you go to work, you do your job, you come home. A lot of people want that because it's simpler, but I feel like they're limiting not only their earning potential, maybe, but they're also like, maybe it's not, I don't know, it just doesn't seem good for them. Like, maybe it is for you, I don't know. But whenever I've done those kind of jobs, it's just, it is grating on the soul. And I hope people I encourage people to look into Braintrust and go to the website. I think it's usebraintrust.com.
You got it.
It's just like cryptocurrencies in general. Like, it's complicated. You have to do more work. It's going to get more user friendly. I'm not saying this about Braintrust. I'm just saying like finding jobs that are more suited to your not only skills but desires. I think in the end, we have to break free of the mold that a lot of us were kind of conditioned to accept. If we went through public schools and all that, where go to college, get a good paying job, and that's good. Everything will be fine. And for a lot of people, that's not working. So I encourage people to just do the hard things. And now is I can't think of a better time than now to really just try something new. And I'm curious to hear from some success stories from people using Braintrust. Maybe leave us with some takeaways from what you've learned, or really the floor is yours. Anything you'd like to leave us with here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we have now 700 or so approved talent on Braintrust. These are highly vetted people that and obviously a subset of them are engaged in jobs, but we've heard now, dozens, scores of these folks, have come to us and said, I'm making more money now than I did before as full time. I'm having way more fun because I can choose what I'm working on, and it's way more flexible, right? I mean, we have people that have, are on track to earn, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on Braintrust. These are very skilled, people, but becoming a freelancer doesn't mean you have to give up a good income, right? It should actually mean the opposite. And so we're proving that out today, and I'm excited to keep that growing and eventually get into more categories.
That's excellent. I was actually this is kind of unrelated, but for some reason I've been watching this series on YouTube about networking and, IT. And because my college roommate did that. And I always thought, this guy, he's just reading books and taking quizzes and, these Cisco certifications, like that looks like a nightmare. And then I drove down to San Francisco to hang out with him before the pandemic hit. There was like a Cisco conference, and he's doing pretty well for himself. And he was just telling me about his job and what he did. And I was like, man, that sounds like something I should have gotten into that, because we were both saxophone players in the college jazz band. And so I started watching this series on, I think it was sponsored by Boson or something like that. And it actually interests me, just what might be boring to some people, but just learning about how to run a network, how to do data centers and all these things. And I'm 31 years old, and I'm seriously considering learning a new I don't even know, a career, I guess, but you're just kind of flirting around with the idea. Maybe I'll go back to school, maybe I'll do it myself. But there's got to be other people in the world right now that are still maybe in a flux mode. Maybe people are on unemployment still. Maybe, I don't know. I don't get out. Obviously, being in Los Angeles, we're still kind of confined. And when we do get out, we're all dressed up like beekeepers, and we kind of avoid each other. But
well, I'll tell you, man. This is a great point. No one should go back to school for anything unless you want to be a nurse, a doctor, I guess maybe a lawyer. If you want to learn a modern technical skill, do it on YouTube for free. I mean, you can learn anything on there. You can learn how to program computers. You can learn how to build networks. I did the same thing. Your friend, I was a Oracle database administrator in college. That was the highest paying job when I was in college. And when I did the whole thing by reading like 6 textbooks and then taking quizzes, and then went and took a certification test, and automatically I was now like certified to earn $200,000 a year as a database administrator. I mean, it was that simple 15 years ago. It's even simpler now, right? So any kind of technical, knowledge worker kind of skill, like do it on your own. Don't pay for it. Don't pay for a degree. The 4-year degrees are absolute scams. They're going to saddle you with debt you may never get out of. Just do it on your own.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And for anybody listening, I think that may be good to hear too. Well, thanks for that. And Adam, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a really good talk. If you got any other websites or any other places people can go to connect, go ahead, tell us now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And you can, our website for Braintrust is usebraintrust.com. Find us on Twitter @usebraintrust. I'm @AdamJacksonSF. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn all the time. We love it.
Oh, great. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Ethan. Great to chat.